is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Legal Hands to the Face show. As always, I'm your host, Bill Colarulo. The Philadelphia Eagles are 2-0. It hasn't all been pretty, but we are sitting here after week 2, 2-0. We were worried about the Super Bowl hangover. It is a real thing. They haven't looked great, but we're 2-0, and you can't ask for much more. We're going to talk about it all. One of the main things in this 2-0 start that has me concerned is the passing game. I want to get into that. Obviously, the defense is giving up too many yards, too much points, but they've had a lot of injuries. We'll talk about that as well. Later on in the show, we are going to be joined by my man, Derek Gunn. Gunner is going to join the show. He's going to give us the inside scoop on some things that are going on. We have some injuries to talk about as well. So we're going to bring on, just like we did last week, Harvard and Duke trained medical doctor Chris Radcliffe will be joining the show. If you guys tuned in last week, you know how bright this guy is. So we're going to break down all the injuries with Dr. Radcliffe. I told Dr. Radcliffe before the season I was hoping to never have to talk to him on this show on Monday nights, and now we got him back-to-back weeks because for a team that was so healthy last season, this Philadelphia Eagles team is getting the injury bug early, but maybe that's a good thing. Let's get it out of the way early. I also want to hit you guys with a trivia question like I do every single week, and I'll give you the answer at the end of the show. So here's the Philadelphia Eagles trivia question before we get started. In the top 10 for the most points scored in a regular season by a Philadelphia Eagle, the top 9 are all kickers. Who is number 10? Who is the only non-kicker in the top 10 for the most points scored? And we'll talk about that at the end of the show. Leave a comment if you're there. And guys, real quick, before we get into it, if you're not already following Legal Hands to the Face on all your social media platforms, head on over to Instagram, TikTok. If you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, be sure that you're following Legal Hands to the Face. We post daily content. We bring this show every Monday, 6:30 on the JAKIB Sports Network, but we bring daily content to all of our social media channels. And if you're not already subscribed to the JAKIB Sports Network, make sure you are. They have great shows. Our guest later today, Derek Gunn, he does Sports Take every day with Rob Ellis. We also co-host the pregame and halftime shows down at the Ocean Casino, live streamed here on JAKIB Sports with the one and only Seth Joyner, Mark Farzetta, Mike Missinelli. So they got some great shows across the network. So be sure to check out the JAKIB Sports Network. Producing for me tonight is my man, Tone DeShields. He also does a great show here on the network. So make sure, if you're not already subscribed to JAKIB Sports, do it. And a quick thank you to our sponsor, the Garden Medical Spa. But let's get right into it. This Philadelphia Eagles, I see Michael Heft in the comments saying it's a scary 2-0. And it has been a scary 2-0 because this Philadelphia Eagles offense, something is off. Something is off. And really the question today is, who is most to blame for this Philadelphia Eagles passing game to look so off? Is it Jalen Hurts? Is it head coach Nick Sirianni? Or is it the new offensive coordinator, Brian Johnson? I mean, you look at Jalen Hurts in the first 2 games, he is only averaging 181 yards in the air. He only has 2 touchdowns, and he had that one really bad interception last week. And you look at his 2022 numbers, he came out of the gate so strong last season, averaging 288 yards in his first 2 games. So he's 100 yards off what he was averaging last year. And it's not passing the eye test. It just doesn't look like they have any sort of rhythm. I went back and I watched the all 22 of the game against the Vikings, and it is clear Jalen Hurts has absolutely no trust in his pocket right now. No trust. He's been sacked 7 times in 2 games, but he is immediately dropping back, going to his first read, and then he's not trusting the pocket, running immediately without looking downfield to see any open receivers. And that was the knock on him coming out of college. I actually went back today and I read his NFL draft analysis coming out of Oklahoma. Weaknesses: inconsistent patience, allowing routes to develop, missing checkdowns and opts for harder throws, Needs to get better at trusting his pocket, quick to drop his eyes when pressure mounts, and more likely to void the pocket than climb it, scan, and throw from the pocket. It's amazing to me that all of these things that were negatives and weaknesses of his coming out of Oklahoma have reared their ugly head again. These were things we expected from rookie Jalen Hurts. But in his first full year as a starter, you saw him grow so much. And last year, do all of those things better. Wasn't rushing out of the pocket, keeping his eyes down the field, scanning the field, going through his reads and his progressions. And he's not doing it right now. And I don't know how much of it is that he's rusty or that he's going against some pretty good defensive minds. Look, let me get this out of the way. I am one of the biggest Jalen Hurts fans out there. I've been high on him since he came out of Oklahoma. I've been so excited that the Philadelphia Eagles were able to get him because of the intangibles that he had. And you saw it last year with how hard he works, that he got better. But this year, he looks like the old Jalen Hurts. And I'm not a Jalen Hurts hater. And I see Anthony Kramer weighing in. He will shut the haters up. I agree. I think you're going to see the Jalen Hurts that we saw last year. He's going to get things right. But right now, he has regressed to all of the weaknesses that we saw of his coming out of college that allowed the Eagles to take him in the second round. And I went and watched that all 22. It's not all on Jalen Hurts, and we're going to get there in a second because I do not like not only the play calling by Brian Johnson, but the play designs by Nick Sirianni and Brian Johnson going into both of these games against a Patriots and Vikings defense. So we'll talk about that in a second. But let's end the Jalen Hurts conversation with a positive. We talked about his draft analysis and what his weaknesses are. Well, guess what his strengths were, according to the draft analysts coming out of college? A leader and a winner. He was 38-4 as a college quarterback. That was his starting record, 38-4. And what have you seen in the last two games? Eagles offense may not be firing on all cylinders, but the Eagles are 2-0. And Jalen Hurts is leading that 2-0 charge. And in the last 25 games, this was put out by JAKIB Sports on their social media. In the last 25 games, Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni are 22-3. So I do think that he's going to get things right. But Nick Sirianni and Brian Johnson, they got to help him out a little bit. I mean, we'll talk about the play calling, but let's take a look at some of the play designs because these play designs are leaving a lot to be desired. There were a few times in the game against Minnesota. Eagles come out in 12 personnel with 2 tight ends. They then go to max protection, meaning both tight ends are staying in. There's only 2 wide receivers in the route, A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. Well, what was the defense that Brian Flores and the Vikings were running? They were running a 2-high safety cover 4. They had a 3-3-5, meaning 3 down linemen, 3 linebackers, and 5 defensive backs on the field. And 5 defensive backs were playing 10 yards off the ball. And they were just sitting. It was the same defense we saw Bill Belichick run. And what the play designs were, max protection, and they have both A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith running 9 routes straight up the field. Well, as soon as he drops back, and you have 5 corners sitting in a cover 4, there's nowhere to go with the ball. You're not giving him any hot routes. You're not giving him any other options. You're max protecting, but there's nowhere to go with the football. I did not like the play designs at all. And the other plays that they just have to get away from, the bubble screens, they are not working. They are not going to work against a 3-3-5 defense when you have 5 defensive backs on the field. And the problem is Jalen Hurts and that offensive line are so athletic. The Eagles not only have one of the most dominant offensive lines in the NFL, they have one of the most athletic offensive lines in the NFL. And I have been screaming for a couple of years now to bring back the screen game, but not the bubble screen game. So when they design those plays, and this is why I have such a problem with the play designs of Nick Sirianni and Brian Johnson. When they're designing these bubble screens and you're throwing a quick pass out to A.J. Brown or a quick pass out to Dallas Goedert, you are not giving your dominant offensive line any time to get out on the perimeter to try to get their blocks downfield on some of these smaller defensive backs. So when they run those bubble screens, guess who your lead blocker was on those screens? Olamide Zaccheaus. Anyone want to guess how big Olamide Zaccheaus is? He's 5'8", 194 pounds, and you have him on the outside as a lead blocker for Dallas Goedert and A.J. Brown on a bubble screen when you have two future Hall of Famers on your offensive line in Lane Johnson and Jason Kelce. You got one of the best left tackles in the league in Jordan Mailata. You got Landon Dickerson at left guard, and you have Cam Jurgens, who's really starting to play well at that right guard position. Why are you throwing a bubble screen with Olamide Zaccheaus as your lead blocker? Or worse, Quez Watkins, or even Devontae Smith. Use your offensive line. I am all for the screen game. Set it up and give your offensive line time to get on the perimeter so that they can start to block some of these smaller players. Those are the problems I have with the game plan. Another example, and I can go probably all night because I was throwing things at the screen watching that all 22. Third and goal from the 8-yard line. The Philadelphia Eagles call a zone read with Jalen Hurts with 0 receivers in the route. No pass option. So they run a basically RPO with no P in the RPO. It's basically just a read option with no one to throw the ball to from the 8-yard line. So Hurts rides DeAndre Swift. The end starts to crash, so Hurts pulls it to go around the outside. Well, they're just sitting there in their defense, and there's no one to throw the ball to. He gets tackled, no gain. They got to settle for a field goal. So it's these play designs that the Philadelphia Eagles have to fix. And they've had a long week. We're 2-0. We got 10-day break right now. But we know what the formula is. Bill Belichick and Brian Flores pretty much did the same thing. They come out in nickel, dime, they run a 2-high safety, cover 4 look, and they are sitting back. They are occasionally bringing pressure with their linebackers, but most of the time they're all just sitting there. And you got these 5 D-backs 10 yards off the ball. You saw Bill Belichick do something similar last night to the Miami Dolphins, but Mike McDaniel had a great counter for it. They started throwing short passes to Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill had a great night last night, didn't have a play longer than 15 yards. So it's up to this Philadelphia Eagles coaching staff. I'm not absolving Jalen Hurts. We talked about his struggles at the beginning of the show. I'm not absolving him. But this offense and this coaching staff have to come up with a better game plan. You know what these defenses are going to throw at you now. You know they're going to come out in nickel and dime packages. So now figure out how to beat it. And what did the Eagles do? I'm going to give Brian Johnson some credit now. They realized, hey, we're not going to be able to throw. We're not going to be able to throw against this nickel and dime cover 4. So let's pound the rock. And that's what they did. You look at the New England game, they only gave their running backs 16 carries. And Gee Jr. hit the nail on the head. Run the ball. Exactly. And they only gave their running backs 16 carries in week 1 against the New England Patriots. Against the Minnesota Vikings, they realized, hey, we can't throw the ball. And they gave their running backs 36 carries in that game. And you saw DeAndre Swift have a career night. 28 carries, 175 yards. He had an average yards per carry of 6.25. Impressive. And that's what the Eagles have to do. I know the Eagles want to come out early, throw the ball, put up points, and then establish the run. We got to switch that mindset. We need to establish the run, and then we'll be able to pass off of it because these teams are not going to let you get the big play anymore. They're going to come out in those nickel and dime packages. And if they want to sit there in a 2-high safety look, pound the ball down their throat like you did against the Minnesota Vikings. They had a 16-play drive, and the Philadelphia Eagles ran the ball 13 times. Do it. Keep doing it. until a team shows that they can stop it. And then once they start to creep those safeties down, now you can take your shot over the top to DeAndre Swift, A.J. Brown, Dallas Goedert. But you're going to have to establish that run first. But I want to talk about DeAndre Swift as well, because there is one thing that concerned me is what a game. What a game. He showed that not only does he have the patience to wait for his blockers, he also was decisive in hitting the holes when they opened up. And he has that home run potential that we all grew accustomed to with Miles Sanders last year. But there's one thing that concerns me is the amount of carries that they gave DeAndre Swift. I know Kenny Gainwell was hurt. Let's hope he comes back this week. We're going to talk to Dr. Ratcliffe later in the show about it. But you look at DeAndre Swift. First of all, he's only gone over 100 yards in his career 4 times in the previous 3 seasons. One of them was against the Eagles in week 1 last year. You all remember that, when he went for 144 yards. But he's only gone over 100 yards 4 times. But what's more concerning to me is he's only had more than 15 carries twice in his career. And here's what my concern is. You look at 2020, the one game he had more than 15 carries, he had 16 carries. He missed the next 3 games due to injury. In 2022, he had 15 carries against the Eagles in week 1. He followed that up with 5 carries in week 2, 7 carries in week 3, and then he got hurt and he missed 3 more games. And then he only had more than 8 carries 2 more times the entire season. So the Philadelphia Eagles have to, yes, give Swift the ball. Give him the ball. But you cannot give him 28 touches. I know this was a unique situation. Gainwell was hurt. Boston Scott was out with a concussion. But you're going to have to bring in some sort of other running back that can carry the ball. And I think it will be Kenny Gainwell, but you got to feature DeAndre Swift. I think the magic number for Swift would be 12 to 15 touches a game is what I would like to see. And you got to get him more involved in the passing game as well. But I think if you try to give this guy 25 touches a game, he's not going to last very long, because you just look at the history and he's never been able to do it in his career. But we talked about the game plan. We talked about Jalen Hurts, and we got to talk about Brian Johnson as a play caller. It is just something that is an art that you don't know if you are good at until you do it. Shane Steichen was masterful at running plays last year, at calling plays, knowing what time to dial up the right play. And more importantly than that, he knew how to get Jalen Hurts into a rhythm that would carry over for the entire game. You haven't seen that yet with Brian Johnson. And this is because the guy's never called plays in the NFL. I still have confidence that he's going to figure it out and he's going to be able to do it. And what a luxury as an offensive coordinator to be able to turn to your stud offensive line and your running game when things aren't going well. But if we want to start to beat these better teams, Brian Johnson has to get better as a play caller. We knew this was going to be a transition. Not only did the Philadelphia Eagles lose Shane Steichen, offensive coordinator, and look what he's doing in Indianapolis. They win yesterday. Anthony Richardson, he gets hurt. Gardner Minshew mania going on in Indianapolis. He comes back. They win that game. And you just saw he's a good play caller. But they also lost Jonathan Gannon. And say what you will about Jonathan Gannon, losing both coordinators is a very tough thing to overcome. In fact, the Philadelphia Eagles are only the 3rd team since 1994 to have to replace both coordinators after a Super Bowl appearance. The 2004 Patriots had to do it, and the 1994 San Francisco 49ers had to do it. So it's not an easy task by any means. So the fact that we're sitting here 2-0, coming off of a Super Bowl hangover, coming off replacing both offensive and defensive coordinator, and with our MVP quarterback really not playing well, I'm going to take it. I'm going to take it. And let's jump over to the other side of the ball, the defense. For a team that was so healthy last year, you look at the injuries we've already had. In the preseason, Zach McPherson tears his Achilles, out for the year. Sean Bradley, not sure how much he was going to play on defense, but a really solid special teams player. He's out for the year. This game, they lose James Bradbury against the Minnesota Vikings, going up against the best wide receiver in the league in Justin Jefferson, a really talented rookie in Jordan Addison, and that tight end, TJ Hawkinson, who we know what he can do. You also lose Nakobe Dean. You lose your starting safety, Reed Blankenship. And then to make things even worse, in the middle of the game, you lose Avant Maddox to a torn pectoral muscle. We're going to talk to Dr. Radcliffe about that later in the show. There's some reports that maybe his season isn't over. We'll find out what the likelihood of that is. But let me digress for 1 second. Avonte Maddox, man, the guy cannot stay healthy. He's only played more than 12 games one time in his career. He played a 16-game season a couple years ago. He just hasn't been able to stay healthy. And unfortunately, they backloaded his contract like Howie Roseman likes to do. His cap hit this year was $4 million. If the Eagles bring him back next year, his cap hit would balloon to $10 million. There's no way they're going to bring him back on that deal. If they cut or trade him with a post-June 1st designation, they would save $7.5 million. I cannot imagine they bring back a guy as injury-prone as he has been. But, yeah, Mark DeStefano saying, was Madden injury-friendly fire? It's hard to say. He was doing it on the tackle, so he got caught up, tore his pectoral muscle as he was holding on to make the tackle, so it's tough to say. It's unfortunate, though, because when he's on the field, he's one of the best nickel corners in the NFL. He just can't stay on the field. But you look at this defense, and you want to give them some sort of slack here. They've had a lot of injuries, new defensive coordinator, but they let Kirk Cousins put up 364 yards and 4 touchdowns. They let Mac Jones put up 316 yards and 3 touchdowns. In 2 games, the opposing quarterbacks have a 67% completion rate, 680 yards passing, and 7 touchdowns. That's not going to cut it when we get into that gauntlet around week 9 going against the top quarterbacks in the NFL with, I'm going to put Dak in there. He's playing well. Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen. These guys are going to be able to pick apart this defense if you're letting Mac Jones and Kirk Cousins do it. But what was interesting is you look at all these injuries. Nakobe Dean goes down in week 1. Christian Ellis steps in and plays linebacker. Well, the Eagles must not have been happy with the way he played because he only got 4 snaps against the Minnesota Vikings. They gave 95% of the reps to Nicholas Morrow, who stepped in and actually played pretty well. So I expect to see more of Morrow at the linebacker position. We're going to take a break in a minute, but I just want to get through this real quick. Reed Blankenship not playing in the game against the Vikings. Everyone was so hopeful we were now going to see Sidney Brown at that safety position. Sidney Brown's going to step in. It's his time to shine. Well, Sidney Brown only played 4 snaps on defense against the Minnesota Vikings. Justin Evans played 100% of the snaps on defense, and Terrell Edmonds, the safety from Pittsburgh, played 91%. So Sidney Brown must not be ready because he still didn't get his opportunity. And then the other interesting thing was no James Bradbury, no Avonte Maddox. The Eagles don't turn to the rookies Eli Ricks or Keely Ringo. Each one of those guys only gets 1 snap in this game. They turn to Josh Jobe, who we knew was going to get the start over with Bradbury out, and Mario Goodrich. So now with Avonte Maddox maybe being out for the season, we'll find out from Dr. Radcliffe, who's going to be your safety? Who are they going to let step in there? Who's going to be your nickel corner? Looks like Reed Blankenship will hopefully be back, but who's going to be your nickel? Do they give Eli Ricks a shot? Do they give Keely Ringo a shot? We will see. But we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to have the one and only Derek Gunn on the show. So we're going to get his opinion on some of these things. Who does he think is to blame for this Philadelphia Eagles passing offense looking a little off kilter here? But we'll talk to D Gunn. We'll be back in a couple minutes.